Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Finding Freedom. So, let's talk about finding freedom because is freedom something that was used to capture someone's belief in something that was free and then they get screwed over in the long run because they're using their freedom of speech? But then there's number two, which gives everybody the right to bear arms, but you should really look for the bare necessities. Now, how do you avoid this trap, right? The green trap, the shiny object syndrome, so on and so forth. So, speaking from a context where I was in the military and I was in charge of ammunition, certain people don't get certain things. See, people could preach and talk and present, so on and so forth, all they want about peace, equality, so on and so forth. But the thing is, do you want it? See, because people will use their communication and everything else in order to do one thing, but then do another to get by. Now, here's the thing. If you cannot speak and use your words, well, then it angers other people. See, the goal of having number two is not to have to use number two. So let me break it down even further. If you are so sure about using number two, then you go to the ASP or the depot or you go to Outdoor World or whatever and you pick up your supplies, right? Whatever you need in order to survive, right? And then, of course, there's going to be threats in the environment, so on and so forth. So you grab things that are shiny, so on and so forth, whatever that may be. Even though there is a sun in the sky, so on and so forth. Now, if we were to put this into a different context, right? What is belief, right? If I told you this, that, and the third, and people want to talk about God and mess with people's beliefs, well, let's talk about marketing. I used to be in marketing, check the receipts, so on and so forth. Most people don't understand the words coming out of their mouth. They just like playing a game because they too are lost, right? And so when you're trying to sell a product or you're trying to make money, right? Whether you're in the e-com space or if you're in sales or if you're in, I don't know, real estate or whatever, you have to acknowledge something, right? When there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 things pointing everywhere, well, what direction do they go in? Do you listen to understand to solve their problem, or do you do other things, right? Because as marketers, we got to make you believe that something like this, phone included, is valuable, right? And then justify that belief with a price point because, well, if the price is high, then it must be good, right? If it says a lot of nice things, it must work, right? If the doctor says they know how to heal people, they must know how to do their job, right? If a psychiatrist or psychologist says one thing because they have a piece of paper and they've been doing it for a long time, they must be right, not greedy. So that's why they have a high salary, but they also cash in on commissions because they know how to use communication, right? I guess that's why they have communion, so on and so forth, right? It's speaking from a spiritual context, right? People want to be accepted, but yet you can't accept others. Okay. Well, you like the sight of a rainbow. It looks cool, but you can't see that flag anywhere, so on and so forth. You like the colors of the American flag, but then again, you don't know why it looks like that. And then, of course, people still don't get it. And then they keep pushing the envelope, right? Hence, finding freedom. So, if you ever seen Finding Forrester, so on and so forth, it was with Sean Connery, etc. They thought Jamal ended up plagiarizing words, so on and so forth, etc. Well, in the movie, Sean Connery had to put everybody in their place, so on and so forth. And he thanked them for being a friend and everything else because, well, who's going to believe that a black kid in a prestigious school can come up with this intelligent knowledge, right? These words. He's speaking in our language. He's speaking English just like us. But the way it's structured, the way it's designed, the way the adjectives just match up with the verbs and the nouns and the pronouns, so on and so forth. There's no way he could be that intelligent. Then, of course, people want to do other things, right? like play with technology, so on and so forth, etc. Because, well, if someone said AI was going to take over the jobs, everybody would lose their mind, so on and so forth, and there wouldn't be any jobs for people. And I guess you wouldn't need all those high salaries in San Francisco, right? Or Northern California, right? That's where Google is. That's where all these, companies that make money, Palo Alto, whatever the case may be, or what is it, Palo, which in some languages means stick, right? And then alto means high, so on and so forth. So weird. But anyways, you have Facebook out there and all these things. And, people still can't put two and two together. So if I told you that this is one T and I take another T and I put them together, and we'll call that pi, and pi equals 3.14, whatever the case, right? Whatever numbers are jumbled up in there. I'm sure you know numbers, right? So why were there two T's put together called pi, right? Remember, what is it, Nickelodeon or whatever, Wildin' Out, so on and so forth, you get a pie in the face, etc., so on and so forth. Most people like to say certain things without having proper understanding. I had this friend named Richard one time. He'll probably omit this or catch amnesia or something. And he said, ooh, steak, I want to try that, so on and so forth. I say, yeah, you are what you eat. Keep going, please. You ever wonder how some societies are able to feed the populace and others can't? Are you an American or are you Americant? Or can you not think without justifying and hoarding things? Think about it, right? Because they say, oh, you don't want to take your medicine. Well, we're going to force them to take their medicine. So we're going to put penicillin and all these other drugs in the animals, see if they take it correctly, because they eat the animals, so on and so forth. And that's how we'll get them. Okay, well, if that doesn't work, we'll do something else. If that doesn't work, we'll do something else. So, since United States Marines, Uncle Sam's Misguided Children, are taught how to take care of children, or kids, or adults that like to act like children, right? Or adults that like to act like kids, right? AK-47, think about it. Because a lot of people don't have time for the things that they bring into this world. And then when those things get bigger, they think with the old mindset, I'm not responsible for this anymore. I shouldn't support these things anymore. I shouldn't care anymore. Well, the clue's in the title, healthcare, right? And then there's mental health, or is that men's health? I have no idea, but there's a lot of men out there that have mental health issues in comparison to women. Well, let me see. Are you a man or a woman? It's been said by science, and apparently Google can approach this to you, right? If you are a judge, you can present this evidence as you approach the bench, so on and so forth. As you can see, I'm sitting down right now, but I'm at a picnic table, not on a bench or the sidelines. So what I'm trying to say, because some people pretend like they don't understand things, right? So let me go a little bit further, right? If a piece of paper called the Constitution gives you a set of rules, we'll call them the Bill of Rights. And then all of a sudden you realize you have no rights. And if you upset somebody, they'll just take all the things away from you, so on and so forth. And then you're like, well, why was I here in the first place? They don't believe in freedom. They're dumb, so they think free is free, so let's call it freedom. Healthcare doesn't care. Neither does it care about men, because the people with the money get whatever they want. Money is paper or bread or cash, so on and so forth, because if you see a lot of things or something that looks good, you got to pay for it. But if you don't want to pay for it, how do you tactically acquire it? Well, if gold's not valuable, art's not valuable, paper's not valuable, the words right there on a dollar bill and everything about it is not valuable, then what is? Well, I could see where people with money are. I could see how certain individuals get treated. I can see what happens when they emphasize their power and control because they have a lot of numbers, right? And then when people get out of control, we'll send them to healthcare because two could play that game, but it takes three to tango. So you have the ambulance, that's one. You have the healthcare system, that's two snakes. I guess 2 + 1 = 3. And then you have the invisible hand, that's the mental health department, so on and so forth. But they'll a department of the healthcare community. We'll call that psychology for the psychos out there. And then when they don't want to listen to us even further, we'll come up with medication or pills and say they have the ism. So they must believe in Buddhism. Oh, but let's talk about China, so on and so forth, etc. But what you put in your plate, do you consider it fine china? Do you consider it ceramic? Do you consider it fragile? Or is it made out of plastic, which is mixed with petroleum, right? And then people still can't appreciate stuff. So we're going to give them apps, right? So they can apply themselves to something, right? They could, appreciate something, right? I guess we'll call it an application, right? How do you integrate people with each other, right? Now, getting back to Google, if you ever seen Nemo, right? Google states that a clownfish will quite literally change sexes in order to keep the species alive. So is a clown a joker or a joker a clown? Well, I know McDonald's has a clown as their representative, so on and so forth, their mascot, etc. Right? But is that food good for you or is it bad for you? Is it processed or is it natural? Think about it. Is it Target or Target? What's interesting is that Jigsaw, if you ever seen that, it's a complex thing, life or death situation, etc. And Jigsaw is like this puppet, whatever, that has 2 target symbols on each cheek. And this is something that people didn't understand because it takes a creative, logical, artistic, scientific, spiritual person that may or may not understand emotions or does understand emotions to understand these things, right? However, if you don't understand how to use words, we'll teach you how to spell them out with a pen and paper. But then again, what's valuable? Is it the thing that's in your hand or is it not? See, John Hancock, right? This is why they say you shouldn't masturbate, but then again, the clue's in the title, right? Says one thing. So are you pleasing yourself or are you doing it to please others? Are you being nice to get in there and then something comes out and you're like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do with this? So on and so forth. Are you doing it for yourself, right? Are you trying to take care of others or are you trying to do something else? Coming back to the ammunition supply point thing, people have shiny object syndrome, right? Well, what's shiny object syndrome? But people see something, their eyes light up, they get wider, so on and so forth, etc. And they go, ooh, I want that. But somebody says, you can't have that, that's mine. And then all this chaos and turmoil starts, right? There was a movie called The Italian Job. And in The Italian Job, there was an old timer in there talking to Mark Wahlberg. And he says this line, it was very specific. So please pay attention and try to understand instead of respond. He says, I trust everybody but the devil inside them, right? Now, some people will be like, oh, the devil's not real, this, that, and the third, blah, 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 everything else. But they weren't understanding the context of the statement, right? And then in the movie Entrapment with Sean Connery, he tells Catherine Zeta-Jones, beautiful thief, first we try and then we trust. Right? Something like that, right? So we'll try to see if you could take care of life. So you get a baby, right? And then you got to take care of that baby. We'll see how that baby is raised, how it's understood, because babies can't speak, so on and so forth. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. And then we'll see exactly how many times you need to understand the lesson. Okay, you did good with the boy. Let's see how you do with the girl. Okay, so now you have a girl. Oh, but what if you have a girl first? Okay, we'll see how you did with the girl, and then we'll see how you do with the boy. And then we'll see how they're treated, etc. Right? And then we'll see how other people treat them, etc. And if that doesn't work and you're lonely, get a pet. Right? Why do you get one? Well, sometimes you need a companion, keep you company. That's, I guess, why people work at a company. Because you need a companion or a group of people, individuals that know how to work together, so on and so forth, in order to accomplish a task. But the only reason they're working at the company is to get money, because I don't think they understand what's valuable, or somebody doesn't think they understand what's valuable. So they continue to provide for something, then they get stressed out. And then when they get stressed out, they say, why am I doing all this work for, etc. But then what happened? Did you take care of the thing that was valuable or not? Right? And if you're talking about knowledge, right? Well, knowledge doesn't, what? The K is silent, so knowledge must not be spelt with a K, right? My mother used to say, oh, you're Jewish like me, which was hilarious because she's apparently Catholic or Christian or one of those. And I said, interesting, you must have an education. I don't think she was understanding the context there, because there's no G or J in there. But if they tell you it's enunciated or pronounced that way, then so be it, right? When people start thinking critically as a collective or as a individual, right? But they choose to help, assist. Hold on one second. And work together, they could create a team, right? Now, riddle me this, Batman. Since DC likes to play around, but Washington State somewhere else. What's the value of $1? What's the value of putting your name on something if you're not a man of your word? Now, if you're a female, we could put the WO there, so on and so forth. If you are in the LGBTQ community, just say you're more masculine. If you're more masculine, meaning you act more like one individual that you portray on screen. If you're a female, say I have more feminine energy, but I'm about 50-50. If you're bisexual, you're about 50-50, so on and so forth. And these are ways you could communicate. But if people understand these things and they don't care and they discriminate because they could say, oh, I don't believe in racism, but yet they'll go to NASCAR that has a rainbow logo and still not get the point. It's very interesting, right? And then they try to reverse engineer and backtrack. What did we do wrong? Well, you didn't take care of the thing that you brought into this world. You were interested in creating something, right? You were interested in helping, so you say. But some people talk a lot, right? You want to talk about it. But some people can't think straight sometimes. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to give somebody high beams. We'll call those implants. And see if they flash anybody to get their attention. Because when you can't drive, you have to sometimes flash your lights in order to get people's attention. And if that doesn't work, you have to raise your voice. So they'll put a horn in the car, right? If people are just that blind, right? Because they have different intentions. Because, when you're at the amusement park, kids like playing bumper cars. So because they could afford certain things, because they have a lot of money, they'll damage your thing in order to do their thing, so on and so forth, because they still don't get it, right? And then they tell you to get degrees, right? So on and so forth. You want to be a doctor and take care and be a steward of life, so on and so forth. Go get this degree. It's going to take about this time, right? Because apparently, according to psychology, it takes a long time to learn things. So we're going to also do the marshmallow test to see if you will not only do the degree and then go through that whole time with all that money, and then what you actually do with it. Are you actually trying to help people? Or are you trying to do something else? I mean, think about it. I remember one time I got upset because people wouldn't let me help or assist. And I remember I came to tears and I banged on the floor and I said, why won't you let me help anyone? And somebody told me one time, name's not there, but it'll come to me. And he goes, you're not here to help everybody, so on and so forth. You can't save everyone. I said, I understand that. And then he kept going. And then he started yelling. And then he went and, did the whole finger pointing thing. Because, he made like 30 something million dollars from selling some Jackson Hewitt franchise, went into real estate, so on and so forth. He did this at a French bakery called Amelie, so on and so forth. And so he kept going, and then he's like, you never did this, and you never did that, and blah, 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 blah. And you don't know what it's like to run a company, and you don't know. I said, except in combat. And he stopped. And he said, I never done that. I said, exactly. See, because being in charge of ammunition, you have to make sure things are handled with care. If not, they explode. So there was a butter bar lieutenant, and I'll go ahead and explain this one real slow for those that don't get it. Kid that went to school, got a college degree, got a nice little shiny thing on his arm, made him feel impressive. He was in charge of people, so on and so forth. But he wasn't thinking straight, right? He saw a mortar, which is like a miniature bomb, on the side of the road. And he decided to turn it into the ammunition supply point. He wasn't paying attention to detail or asked questions to understand this thing, right? Maybe he also didn't understand the manual, so on and so forth, so he didn't read everything, because if you see an explosive device, you're supposed to call EOD, so on and so forth, Explosives Ordnance Disposal. I've worked with them briefly before in the past. And so he decides to turn it in. Now at the time, I think I was a lance corporal or corporal, whatever. And, he says, hey, I thought I was supposed to turn this in here. I was told I was supposed to turn this in here. I didn't know if he was playing a game or if he was an actor or not. But here's the thing. The primer was struck. Now, for those of you who like emphasizing your right to bear arms, the primer is the little dot at the back of a bullet that the pin hits to set off the round, right? Ignites the gunpowder, so on and so forth. I don't need to explain that for you. Right? Because people like pulling triggers or using their words to trigger people, if that makes sense, right? Because they still want to F around and find out. So this officer comes in and starts saying all these things to me because I'm a lower ranking person, right? I have a black insignia on because I'm enlisted, like I didn't go to college, so on and so forth, or I didn't go to whatever school they needed me to go to, because remember, class, if you haven't seen it, deals with creativity, logic, art, science, and spirituality. He decides to lose his mind with me to put me in my place. So I said, sir, you wait right here. I'll be right back. And I got my master gunnery sergeant, right? He was enlisted too. And so me and Master Guns walk out there, and Master Guns tells him the same thing. He goes, I don't know why you didn't listen to my lance here. However, wherever you found that, I suggest you go back and put it down gently. See, you're holding a round that's called cooking off. Not cooking that the kids do when they're thinking, so on and so forth, right? But Master Guns and I had to give them a schooling or an education, as they would say, right? Because some people think they're smart. And so, it's like Trump saying they're eating the dogs. Well, if somebody killed your dog and then ate it in front of you, would you appreciate that? No, you'd probably call it in on the phone, right? But then again, why would you use the phone? Well, because you were scared of losing something that was valuable, right? So when people want to be careless, right, they try to put people in positions, right? Oh, I'm going to put you in your place. No, I'm going to put you in your position. Then they change their words, and that's so interesting. Oh, bless your heart, because I don't want you to get upset, so on and so forth. But I want to get away with saying something to make myself feel good, etc. Now, what's so interesting about this whole scenario is that I had to get an old-timer. He's not going to take offense to this because he's done his time, to explain something to somebody who thought they knew something. So, the other time this happened, there was another gentleman that started finagling or fudging paperwork around. The ammo tech that was with him did as, he was told, right? And I had to look at the paperwork, like an accountant looks at the paperwork, right? And so we found out that he was writing certain things off as expendable rocket launchers. Those of you who played Call of Duty, Black Ops, Rainbow Six, whatever the case may be, he was saying that he wasted all his rounds and that he needed more, and he would come back with the shell, so on and so forth. Well, there was a couple things missing, and then we found that it was going to his pocket, right? Because he was stealing them, and it was being sold on the black market. What is the black market? Glad you asked. Well, there's a black market, there's a white market, there's a gray market, so on and so forth, etc. And so, he thought, I guess he was being clever, because in accounting, there's a term called gray accounting, right? Gray accounting is when people start to finagle the numbers to make things look good or appear real, right? And some people are experts or professionals at this. That's why you get a forensic accountant, so on and so forth, right? Somebody to look further into it to truly see what's there. Now, what's interesting is that I didn't need a lot of information to see that something smelled fishy, if you know what I'm saying, right? And so they got upset, but an investigation was launched and he got caught, right? Now, if I told you that till death do us part, right? But then that doesn't mean anything, then what's the purpose of the ring? See, a ring is shiny, like a diamond ring, right? Or a sapphire ring, or a ruby ring, or a emerald gemstone, so on and so forth, right? Or something like jade, right? Etc., right? And so that shiny thing is now of value, so I'm going to give you something of value in hopes that you value me in return. Well, if that doesn't work, would you throw the ring down a drain, or would you throw it down a well and see how far they go? You know what? We'll call a bank Wells Fargo. How about that? Then maybe people will put what they value there in store, right? It for later. So we'll take the shiny thing or the well and we'll throw it down a deep hole to see if you would go get it, retrieve it, or even care about it. They made a movie, I think, called The Ring, right? Or something like that. There was a girl or a child that was thrown into a well, came back and started, scaring people and all that. And people got a lot of entertainment out of it. Well, what's real and what's not? Are you fluid, or are you still lacking understanding? See, most people could barely stand on their own 2 feet, and some people still won't take care of them. They have to get paid to do it. I guess that's why they put them in hospice. And then they have to pay nurses and other people, not only to give them attention, but to assist them with certain things, right? Some people will say anything just to get by and collect a check, right? But then again, what is a check? Oh, check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? See, when people don't pay attention, especially when they're driving, accidents occur. And I remember this accident of a 7-ton. There was a couple passengers in the back. They were coming from the range, and it flips over. And I understood the situation. My buddy jumps out the car. Another friend jumps out the car. We start taking care of it, so on and so forth. We start assessing all the damage. And there is a corporal trapped underneath the tire of a 7-ton. Head smashed in, other part of his face into the ground. The driver wasn't paying attention, and he oversteered, then tried to overcorrect and flipped the vehicle. It was a 7-ton. Think about that for a second, right? What weighs a ton, all right? And so when you think about that, right, what's important? What's valuable, right? Would it be the people that are doing their job, or the people that get out or retire from doing their job? Now, continuing on, my buddy Resendez quickly went into shock, right? He sees the guy's head. He can hear him moaning and screaming, so on and so forth. He looks back at me and says, I don't know what to do. Guerrero, what do I do? I said, go take care of Simpson, so on and so forth, whatever Steven's name is, etc. He had like a broken leg, collarbone, and everything else like that. And as people were showing up onto the scene, I ended up calling topside to the ASP. And I remember this. I called. I said, Sergeant Sammy, I need everybody to the bottom of the hill right now, headed towards the barracks. He understood exactly what I was saying. I didn't need to break it down. I didn't need to give a synonym. I didn't need an antonym. I didn't need to give analogies. I didn't need to give any other clues for him to get the idea that we have a serious situation. There's a lot of valuable things, aka assets, so on and so forth, etc., that are damaged, and we need to fix it, right? And apply attention and be a combat lifesaver. So anybody that's in CLS, I need them to come down here, right? That was more description for those of you that don't get it yet, right? People showed up, so on and so forth. I had this guy named Reyes. He pieced out in his Mercedes, made some bullshit story later. And then, let's see. Everybody was taken care of. My buddy Brad Marjak quickly screamed because he was, calling for help. So I went over there. And he had his hand on the driver's head, so on and so forth. He's holding him up, right? And he goes, yo, he's like unconscious, this, that, and the third, etc. And I was just like, okay. He's like, what do I do? And I looked at him. I said, move your hand for a second. He had a hole the size of a $50, quarter size, so on and so forth, in the back of his head. I said, put your thumb in it until somebody gets here. Plug the hole, etc. He said, okay. And then I quickly ran back to the other side, etc. Made sure that the guys, Resendez and everybody else, Sammy, everybody came, Hoffman, so on and so forth, Hellman, what's it called, and all the others, well, Kevin, you know who you are, came down. People came to assist and help, right? And I was there, and I remember vividly seeing people stop all of a sudden, right? And other Marines stopped, right? And literally, I did not know how to tell them that there was nothing that they could do, right? Because there was about 6, 7, 8 Marines, about 10 of them, give or take, if not more, trying to push the 7-ton up just to give enough space to pull the body out from underneath the 7-ton vehicle. But I just let them try, right? I stood with Corporal Laud till he took his last breath. And I knew he could hear me, right? Which was crazy. Then the ambulance came onto the scene, and this white hat got out, and he started calling the shots. He's like, we got one casualty, this, that, and the third, so on and so forth. My head quickly shot back, and I was like, interesting. It was almost like I saw something in him, right? Like he wanted to actually help people. He knew the one job to get right. They quickly, took care of everything. And I had people tell me, oh, you should avoid talking about it. You should avoid going somewhere to tell somebody about it, etc. So on and so forth. I eventually broke, and I had to talk to somebody. And I told them, don't tell anybody, because certain people who went to combat deserve that. So we'll just call it not service connected. They said, okay, we agreed, etc. Now, this was the cool thing about that, right? Because I remember when I went into boot camp, right? I ended up going down as a heat casualty. Reason being, I ended up needing, they said, to lose weight in order to go. I had an old wrestling trick where I would work out and sweat my ass off, lose water weight, so on and so forth. And they were like, how'd you lose so much weight so fast? I said, I did it, so on and so forth. Long story short, they pull me out of formation. I go down as a heat casualty, etc. We get to the hospital, and there's another gentleman that said he was feeling dizzy because he wanted to get out of it, so on and so forth. And I remember the doctor and the nurse, or corpsman, as they say, came over. They're like, you had some severe injuries, so on and so forth, etc. What do you want to do? You have the option to leave right now, or you can stay. The kid next to me, lying down in the bed, was just trying to make something up. So he's like, oh, can I stay, so on and so forth. And he starts hearing all these options, so on and so forth, because I said I need to think about this. Well, after the kid next to me hears these options that were presented to me, he decides to use that as leverage for himself to try to get out of everything. Doctor comes back over to me and says, what do you want to do? If you stay, you're going to get rolled back, and then you could go through training, but I cannot release you until you fully recover and you're fully hydrated. I said, okay. I said, can we just say that I got, dehydrated, or not dehydrated, but dizzy, so on and so forth, etc. And that's whatever. And I'll stay. I can't go back, right? The doctor did me a solid, wrote it down as dizziness. I ended up going through a couple IV bags, so on and so forth, etc. About 2 weeks, 14-ish days, so on and so forth, and then I got presented into boot camp again with a different battalion. And so made it through my training, so on and so forth. When I went back, before I even got transferred, the gentleman that was trying to get out of it, it was very interesting. Because I remember the doctor going to the DIs and saying, you have one real one and one trying to get out of it. And they said, thank you. And it was very interesting, right? Because he got to stay in that battalion. I got pushed back, had to recover, forced to, so on and so forth. I guess they say I go hard in the paint sometimes, as they say. And so, granted, I was upset and I was crying, so on and so forth. Upset, not obsessed, upset. And it was interesting because they were like, oh, he's crying, blah, 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 what a bitch, this, that, and the third. And I was just like, whatever, I'll come back stronger. I'll see if I could do it. I will show them that it can be done. And so I went into recovery. When I got out, I did well. Then they introduced a gentleman by the last name of Lopez who had a recon contract. He had a head start, so on and so forth. He made it to, I think, his 3rd month in, came back because he ended up injuring his back, so on and so forth, etc. Replaced me in the position that I was at, and he got to succeed after recovery, etc. I went back in to the center, whatever the case may be, chilled out with the crew, the boys, the homies. Didn't matter if they were male or female or whatever. And so we ended up graduating, so on and so forth, platoon 2066. So, it was a very interesting experience, right? But all that to say that some people do not understand what's valuable until it's gone. Others appreciate things. Some learn how to take care of children, then get bestowed children upon them, or get put into a position where they either teach professionally to educate people on what's important. And if they don't understand what's important, well, then the cycle has to repeat, right? How far will you go down the well in order to acquire whatever you thought was valuable? Because water was down there as well, right? So if you take a coin and you throw it into a well and make a wish, or you throw it into a fountain and make a wish, is that wish going to come true? How far will you go in order to accomplish the task? See, some people don't. They just want to be an ass, so on and so forth, because they care about assets. And then they say, no, we don't. We're not materialistic. So how much cash you got in that pocket right now? Because if I put down a dollar bill in front of you, cash, right? Paper, bread, green, etc., and you say it's not, worth anything and you don't care about it, well, why don't you give me all the money that you have and then let me have it? Since you don't care about it. You cared about it at a certain point because it's a tool, right? Or did you not see it as that? So you just throw it around so you could get what you want. and you use it as, well, a tool. You can use it like a torque wrench, right? You can tighten things with a wrench, you can loosen things with a wrench, or you can make it just right, so on and so forth, with a torque wrench, right? Because of the amount of pressure that has to go on the torque, right? The twisting function, so on and so forth, right? That's why you have a transmission with the engine, they work together, right? The transmission creates torque, etc., so on and so forth. But most people still need a breakdown. They say, oh, peace be steel, so on and so forth, etc. And then people say, that's why it keeps me a piece of steel right here. Now, what do you need a piece of steel for, etc.? Are you a cross, right? If I take two T's and I put them together, right, that will be pi. So are you a cross? Or do you need to go across to the other side to see something, possibly get jealous, that's with a J, then ask why, I guess jealousy, right? I saw something, now I'm upset, envious, etc., blah, 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 blah. So your jealousy speaks, right, or shows. And then you're saying, why? Why don't we have that? Why don't we have this? Why don't we do this? See, there's something called innovation, right? And many people know innovation, right? It leads to invention, right? Or an idea, right? Which is sparked birth of innovation, so on and so forth, etc. But then you have to tell the masses about it, right? That's called marketing, right? And if you want to slide into someone's DM, right? Do digital marketing. It's on social media. Don't worry about it, right? And then if you're trying to do something else, you can read about it, right? And say, oh, that's a good one. Let me go research it. So you go on Google, right? But why Google, not Safari? Why is Safari spelt that way? Do you need to go to the Amazon to see what's valuable and see how the system works? Well, where's the Amazon? Is it in Brazil? So, if you are not understanding that if you do not work together to achieve freedom, you will never acquire it, right? And if you do not acquire that, you'll be left in the working employee status, EM, E equals MC squared, so on and so forth, energy, right? You need money. That's a tool that can be used like energy because your time is valuable. So we're going to buy your time like slavery, and we're going to exchange it for paper that's not backed by anything, which is a con, right? Then we're going to tell you that you have to abide by the Constitution that tells you in the first couple damn sentences in the preamble, we the people, so on and so forth. But then say you're not following the Constitution and people don't understand the first P to begin with. But they want to pray for peace. They want to say, please and thank you. That's what manners. But you couldn't read a manual, so on and so forth. You have to see something and make it realistic enough so that people get it. And the ones that don't, well, you send them further, right? You ever ask yourself, with all this technology and apparently the wars that are going on, how did they get there? How did it get started in the first place? Oh, we're going to send people over here. Well, how did they get over there? Well, if they have technology just like us, didn't they know about it? Did we do something sneaky to get them in? Did we let them think that? I got an idea. Before people keep pushing boundaries, right? To either get people in trouble, to put them in check, or put them in their place, whatever you want to say, learn what's valuable. Because at the end of the day, the things you work for, other people make too. So, if you think that's air you're breathing right now, are you thankful or grateful? Or are you trying to survive? And is that called oxygen or air? Because, well, although air might be spelled with 3 letters, sometimes 4, depending on where you are, you don't want to be an arse, so on and so forth, etc. Well, maybe you'll start appreciating a lot of things around you, and you won't need applications to make you appreciate something. Till next time, my friends, take care, have a great day, and may the fourth be with you. Take care. Peace.